Welcome to SpanReads, not your typical rereads podcast, the 17 shard series where we reread the Cosmere and are giant nerds about it. Today, we will be talking about magic use in Rhythm of War. Joining me is Joshua.
Oh, I am Jofwu.
And Ben.
Hello, you also know me as Overlord Jebus.
And I'm Ian, also known as Weiry. This episode will have spoilers for The Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, Edge Dancer, Oathbringer, Dawn Shard, and Rhythm of War. And I'm very glad that's the last time I have to do that. So, what cool magic things happened in this book?
So much. This was like the magic book.
Right? Yeah. I think we saw new surges being used this time. We saw the surges being used by the fused, which was all really cool.
Just confirmation that, or not even confirmation, because nobody put this on their bingo card, but the reveal that what the fused do is still just surge binding.
Yes, and it's not void binding. It's not.
Mm-hmm. We'll get to void binding one day.
One day.
Maybe Brandon knows what void binding actually is.
The lights, Fabrials, so much stuff.
Yeah, let's dig into like lights and tones and rhythms, because like rhythms have been a part of the book since Words of Radiance. Like we saw Eshonai's plot point, Eshonai's interludes, and like the listeners were attuned into rhythms left and right. Like that's kind of like how they portray emotion rather than physical expressions, which like that's a cool thing. And here we learned those are like a bit more broader and deeper in the world, because we learn about like the pure tones of Roshar, like the pure tone of honor, cultivation, and odium, and how those interact with the various lights, like those being a method to transfer light between gems.
It was that was all really well foreshadowed, I think. Like looking back at other books and rereading up to this one, there's a lot of like just kind of cool stuff about the the significance of sound and vibrations, and it just comes together really well in a way that wasn't like super obvious, but also was clearly intentional, I think.
Yeah,
so,
like it feels cohesive.
Yeah, book one, Capsule with the tuning fork and the sand with the cities matching the patterns that creates. Like straight away out, we're very early on. It's tones, rhythms, stuff is important to Roshar.
And so we knew about Stormlight and Voidlight. In this book, we learn about Lifelight.
Mm-hmm.
And also that, hey, Lift doesn't use Stormlight. She's been using Lifelight the whole time.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother can of worms. And we also learn about hybrid light, notably Tower Light, which is the mixture of Stormlight and Lifelight. And one of the big questions of this book is the blending of Stormlight and Voidlight. Is it possible? And we show that it is through a human and a singer working together.
It's like the decision to use like tones in this way and sound is like, it's just such a great decision because it plays so well with like just visualizing, kind of conceptualizing like what's going on here with these kind of different, tones kind of coming into harmony with one another. It's just really good, like metaphor looming over everything.
There's a lot of in magic in fantasy books. There's a lot of imagining, how things will work, and like, oh, I cast fireball because I imagine a fireball, or they say the words, and like having those rhythm and tones give it a real. There is something physical happening here, which is guiding the magic to do its thing. Mm-hmm. I like it a lot,
and I like that with the hybrid lights. Like there is a blending there of like the two tones and the two rhythms coming together to become something new. It's like the whole thing about an emulsifier, a common purpose of, because it kind of boils down to like the Rhythm of War is this like commonality of purpose between humans and singers, and like the sibling and the Rhythm of the Tower is the blending of purposes between humans and spren. And then we do get a couple scenes of odium and cultivation's rhythms getting blended. Like Venli has a scene, I think it might be Eshni later on. Somebody else does it too, of like the blending. We don't get what that rhythm is called, even though Venli definitely should know what it's called because that's how rhythms work.
Yeah.
So we don't know what that light is called, but hey, there's a commonality of purpose between singers and spren as well.
Something I thought was really fun is how intent plays, because that's what intent is, right? Intent is, hey, two people just can't harmonize and near some light and make it blend. You also have to intend for it to happen. And it's cool to see those Cosmere mechanics. Like, we're learning about them as we're seeing them being used in a way which they have to be used in, you know?
That feeds into the discussion of anti-light, anti-investiture, which is just like, you invert the tone and it sounds exactly the same, but like the troughs are peaks and the peaks are troughs.
Yeah. And to be clear, that's what Gavilar had from the very beginning. So it's...
where did he get it from?
Yeah. So, it's an interesting turn for the series for sure. I'm excited to see like what kind of stuff they do with it beyond just using it as a simple weapon.
Yeah. Obviously it can make big bombs, you can do that, but like, could it be used for like an energy source? Like, you know, we have just like how we have radioactive stuff in real life work as weapons, but it also works to produce energy.
So like Navani has these two discoveries, like warlight and anti-light. And they're both so incredibly important for the war and the end of the war. It's like, warlight is important because it shows that, like, hey, humans and singers can bring themselves together and like work. But anti-light is like, the war can now end one way or the other
with an
because we can kill immortal creatures.
Yeah.
One thing I saw a lot, especially like when after Oathbringer, was like concern about power creep with the characters. Rhythm of War did a great job handling that, I think, because number one, you had things like the suppression fabrials, which you can get into, but there's like ways to sort of limit their powers that are introduced, and then we also now have anti-light, which can just straight up kill the spren and kill the fuse for good. So like I feel like the kind of the ways to sort of thwart the powers kind of coming pretty naturally along with the development of the powers themselves.
So we kind of see our first big application of stone shaping, which is like the surge of cohesion. Venli makes some stone dance and it's happy to see her.
Yeah. I think the biggest surprise for me was the fact that stone was alive. Like, it wasn't just a case of like, oh, hey, yeah, I can now meld stone like it's Play-Doh. It's like, I pick up this stone and the stone goes, hi, what would you like me to be? And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that's how Roshar works. Things are...
it's not too dissimilar from stone soul casting.
Yeah.
Whereas like, you're talking to the cognitive aspects of everything there. I guess it does make sense that like you're talking to the cognitive aspect of the stone that you're trying to reshape. It's also interesting that like there is such a focus on stone for cohesion, because in theory it should work on anything.
Yeah.
Got a lot of stone.
But there was also a little bit about stone shaping being a thing with the singers, like even before everything.
Yeah.
Which like, would like to know more about that, please, Brandon.
And I could totally see, similar to how, you know, when they all sang together to summon the Everstorm, I could totally see a massive group of singers get together and they sing a certain song. It births a city, you know? I could totally see that being how that works.
It's like, the way they describe like sticking a stick into the ground and pulling it out as an axe. Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah, I forgot about that one as well. Yeah, where it's just like an individual person could do that, like before all this whole radiance and the gods arrived, they could. Yeah.
We start digging into what a Bondsmith Unchained can do, which is Terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
I like bondsmithing, like just as magic, as like I don't know, a lot of Brandon's magic is pretty set on like what the rules are, and bondsmithing just is kind of like his the door is open to kind of do Gandalf, whatever you can imagine you can do if you know how.
Yeah, it's very soft magic. Sometimes you just need that.
He uses it well, like the horror you feel when Ishar, I mentioned it before, but the horror you feel when Ishar grabs Dalinar and just starts to rip the Stormfather's bond away is just wild.
Yeah.
Dalinar touching Nail and getting this sort of flashes of flashbacks of his life was a really cool sequence. So there's a lot of stuff being set up in this book for like what's going to happen with the Oath Pact. Downer's really interested in that, and I think that's interesting to see what kind of magic-y, Oath Pact-y stuff goes from there.
Yeah, it kind of underlines the point of like connection is very important in the Cosmere. Like this is really big in the spiritual realm. Like everything is connections. So the magic that manipulates connection to do stuff, super powerful and flexible because you're manipulating the thing that is everything.
One of the reasons I think that moment where Ishar tries to steal that connection is so powerful is because Brandon writes so many hard magic systems. Like with Zeth at the beginning of Way of Kings, where he's just jumping around. It's and all the characters there, they're just spearmen who've never encountered any magic before. And he's scary because like, oh, we've not encountered before, we don't know what he's doing. He's breaking the rules of that, like the normal combat. And then you learn more about the Radiance and you learn how to use their powers. You're like, okay, there is limitations. There are things they cannot let you do. There's hard lines. You standard Brandon Sanderson magic systems. And then Ishar comes along and is like, I can break those rules. I get to do what I want. Basically.
Well, it's a thing that's like those rules are real and existed. The guy in charge of enforcing those rules is dead.
Yeah. And now he can do terrifying things that you wouldn't even think to do.
I mean, in a much smaller way of like connecting the Radiance to the ground so that they can't fly or hold Stormlight.
Yeah.
Because their soul thinks that whole planet is part of them. That's a very small but terrifying thing. The spren bodies.
You.
I don't even know.
I don't even remember now my initial reaction. Because like I definitely don't think I picked up on that immediately when reading that scene. But it's like once you know what's going on, it's just like there's like an instinctual revulsion to that.
Yes.
Like that's wrong.
It was the moment that the cryptic was mentioned about like just a mass of flesh like intestines on that. I just like distinctly remember that because that was the moment I realized what these were, and I was like, oh no. And it's just like the really clinical notes next to it being like, oh, this one didn't survive very long. And it's like, oh God, like, yeah.
Messed up, man. He's creepy.
Yeah.
It's like, why do you think that's a good idea? Why?
Yeah.
Why would you question the eternal God King, Almighty Reborn? Obviously, there's a reason.
He's a wackadoodle.
Yeah. And then there's like, upon rereads, there's the realization that's what the Tukar people were doing to Notum, is they were trying to weaken him so they could take him to be part of those experiments. And it's like, oh no.
And the fact that like most spren like die very quickly, but like honor spren last like 15
basically
minutes.
Human. Yeah, basically human. They've just got clothes for skin.
That's horror in its own right of like, you're alive. You have time to process what's happening to you.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the what's it called? The reason the cryptic sticks out again is like you gain this body. Imagine having lungs, but you can't breathe. But you should have got a hole to breathe out of. You're just gonna die in horrific pain. Like, yeah.
One of my gripes about this book is that there's not enough interludes that are just like, I don't know, just really out there, like just kind of crazy, weird.
Yeah, they're too integrated with the plot.
Can you imagine like a 1-2 page interlude from a spren that like was pulled across? How horrific would that interlude be? It'd be so good.
Yeah. And then like have it not explain what's going on.
Yeah.
Until that would have been so good.
Just like
horrifying, but like
I need this fanfic. Somebody listening to this, go write the POV of an honor spren surviving for 15 minutes on the or it could be a shorter one. It could be one of the ones that lasts like 2 minutes and
the perspective of cryptic needing to breathe but being unable.
Good stuff.
It's just like it's so messed up.
I've always said, bro, when Brandon writes horror, he writes really good horror, and that to me was a horror sequence, like 100%.
The Stormfather seeing it, and like seeing an honor spread, like and knowing the honor spread.
Yeah, because he would. Yeah,
the thing to keep in mind: literally every honor spread in existence is descended from the Stormfather, because we have Syl created before the Recreants, and then we have the 10 honors front created after the Recreants by the Stormfather, and then those 10 created all the rest.
Yeah,
as opposed to like there are some dead eyes that honor created, but like literally his great grandchild on that bed right now. It's just we're gonna move on because we can't just sit here.
I know. I'm like, well, I'm trying to
think about that.
We could talk about more creepy magic with the fused, because we got a lot of new fused. We've talked probably a bit about Elysian already in the previous episode, but his magic was kind of fun, a new challenge for Kaladin. I especially like the deepest ones, like just these fused that can just sort of come out from under the ground out of absolutely nowhere, just pop up and grab people. And
I like the detail that I believe they're deaf and blind when they're in the stone. Like they're not like it's the X-Men who can phase through walls, but like she's still able to perceive what she's doing.
They're blind, but they're like they can still hear the rhythms.
Yeah.
That's kind of what they use to navigate.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting to me is the Reboniel's type of fused. The
Fanani.
Still him?
The Nani. Remember.
I tried really hard to memorize all the fused names.
Yeah. Those ones of alteration are the Fanani.
Fanani, thank you. I really like. So there's something about it to me. So all of the fused, what they do is they get the surge and they internalize it, and like their body becomes about that. So the flying ones are always flying. The cohesion ones can melt through stone. The transportation ones teleport themselves. And I've been trying to think of. I mean, this is partly fueled by trying to come up with cool Stormlight RPG villains that are fused. And
for no reason whatsoever.
For no reason whatsoever. Why would I be thinking of that? And the Reboniel uses her powers once. He breathes either poison or acid on a dude whilst they're attacking the tunnels in Erethier. And I'm trying to think of other cool things you could do with the ability to make anything within yourself. And I'm like, I just don't know. I struggle with it a little bit.
She made a virus that killed a whole bunch of people.
Yes, but did she make it within her own body, or did she science it with
I don't think necessarily it has to be within her own body. I think soul casting has to be involved somehow.
Yeah,
it does seem likely.
It makes it a really interesting question of how soul casting works as you imagine the thing, right? And I think Yesna said in the first book how difficult jam was because it had so many chemical compounds in it, organic materials. And I'm like, imagine how the fused, who are thousands of year old experts in soul casting, what they could do, what they could make. And I'm like, yeah, Could they make a virus? Is that something within their purview to soulcast something into a virus?
And it might be that like the Fanani like expertise like does explicitly help with like soul casting living things.
Yeah. And,
Did we get any other fused in this book?
Magnified ones, big hulks, or is that do we see there's an Oathbringer?
We see those in Oathbringer because that's the progression one. Yeah, we see one turn Carapace into a saw.
Oh yeah. I
had diaforms, Ben.
We had diaforms. They're
diaforms mentioned
as a regal.
I love the Regals. The Regals fascinate me more than the fused are cool, right? But we know there's 9 types of fused, and we're done. There's probably not hundreds, but there could be hundreds of fused. You can make a fused of anything,
Regal.
Right? Sorry, Regal. Yes, sorry. You can make a Regal of anything, and that just really compels me. Of just like, what cool things could you make like Regals out of? Like, what cool mechanics exist in the Cosmere? And that's why I like. That's why diaforms as a mysterious form, which is big and spiky. We don't know anything else about them. And like, cool. What does it do? Compels me. But yeah, with the fuse though, quickly returning. So we're missing the division fused and the tension fused, and so hopefully we will see those in the next book because I really want to know what they are like.
Yeah. Because there is no adhesion fused because adhesion is Honor's truest surge.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the hell that means. There was a word, Brandon, from ages ago, kind of talking about god metals exist on Scadrial and Mistborn. Were there like god surges on Roshar, and Brendan being like, yeah, there's some things you could call god surges, but like it's not a big thing. And then getting this book about Honor's truest surge, I'm like, interesting, because like adhesion is the one surge that like worked fine for Kaladin. And then we have Lift, who was awake because like she was using Lifelight instead of Stormlight. But also like she could use progression, but not abrasion. So it's like, is progression cultivation's truest surge? Does Odium have a truest surge?
Oh, what would that even look like?
I don't know.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Does Honor's truest surge actually mean anything?
TBT.
Yeah. Because like god metals actually, there's an explicit mechanical thing for why god metals are the way they are. Is this just a phrase people use, or does it actually mean something? Again, we don't know.
Yeah, it gets into the like how the surges of Roshar could be seen as like the classical like humors, you know, where it's like these are things that exist in the world, and this is just not an ignorant people. This is the people discovering science, trying to classify things into groups, and they've got 10 nice groups to classify things, and then those groups of people's belief in those things kind of formalize it, because that's how cognitive stuff in the Cosmere works. Or is it actually that these are fundamental things, and that's how they came up with these 10 classifications of everything in the universe?
We've danced around this in other episodes, but Fabrials. Devani is the mother of machines, according to the Sleepless. She does a lot of Fabrial stuff, and kind of coordinating. We see the cool like elevator glove thing.
Yeah,
Kaladin uses that to replace his gravitation.
I don't imagine like getting a lot of use going forward. I guess like some like mundane. It'd be fun to like in the back half to like see like a whole like squad of people with little gauntlets they can fly around with.
Yeah, it's kind of clearly like this exists so Kaladin can do cool fight scenes, and not as a useful thing that will exist in the world.
Like I said, I don't see it as it works as a proof of concept, but just like Bridge 4, I imagine when they do mass produce these things, it'll work a very different method of. I did a lot of like designs, like I actually like drew some out of like wheels with Fabrials on, with like specific aluminium cages only applying parts of the movement of the wheel. I don't know how that would work, but I tried to make a flying bike. It didn't work.
But it's fun that you like get this, like, I don't know, all this stuff about Fabrials in this book that you can like give you some like ideas of like fun things you can imagine that you might be able to do.
It's similar to how there's just lots of different magics in the Cosmere that you can combine in interesting ways, and because you have these like rules of how they work, it means you can then combine those rules to do cool and interesting things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we did mention the time when like Navani was trying to see if you suck up 2 paired spren, well, it's the same spren in like 2 halves, using Resium, can you siphon them into the same spren, into the same gem? Will they merge back together? And then she discovered force magnification in Fabrials, which that's huge.
That is huge. Such a game changer of like, if any in the future, I mean, you can now miniaturize things, right? Like before you had to have a bridge 4, and then bridge 4 had to have a huge bridge.
Fourth bridge.
You had to have a big, you had to then recreate it exactly as like for its lateral movements, and then you had to recreate it elsewhere for its vertical movements. But now you have a way of miniaturizing that. And yeah, I think that for me is that I'm like, cool, that's a game changer right there.
There's the scene where like the discovery happens, and then there's like another line later on of like Raboniel's been looking into it and like thinks there's something there, and that's it. So it's like, this is definitely like Brennan has swung and hit a ball, and it's soaring out there, and someday someone will catch it or it will land. Don't know when that's going to happen, but like it's out there. Something has to happen with this knowledge.
Again, I'm going to go back into my personal things. I tried to like work out how to turn it into a gun, obviously, where essentially you have the 2 halves, as you do, where like essentially you have like a cartridge which has like a small bit and a big bit, and then you have like it fires the big bit and then shatters it. So it like goes a short distance to give the little bit momentum, and then it shatters the big bits, and the little bit flies off at incredible speeds. So it's like a spring loaded, but then they'll be very difficult to mass produce these. Because every single time you'd have to come up with a new pair.
We also learn in this book where ancient Fabrials come from, which is just spread and become Fabrials.
Fair, to be honest,
Cool. They can make shard blades. Why not other things? I
feel like we got a little fixated on like, oh, they have to be the metal, and it's kind of like, I don't know, they can be something more complex than that, I guess. Yeah, I mean, you have the sibling itself. The oath gates are spren. It's kind of turns out they're basically deeply integrated. They're not just like some spren that hang out next to a device. They are the device is part of them. So,
was there a line in Oathbringer where Odium told the Thunderclast to like
dismantle the Oathgate?
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember, did he say like find the gem that holds the Oathgate or something? Like,
well, it's like we can rebuild it as long as the gemstones are intact.
Yeah, that was it.
Because there is a very big focus on spren into metal, which like even the spren remark on. But like, no, they can also turn into crystal. Like Sibling did it a lot, like the veins of garnet.
Whose Shardblade has like big, thick bits of crystal on the backside of it or something? Or was that just a bit of artwork?
That's
Edelin. Maya has like we don't know if it's like actual crystal or it's just like metal in the shape of crystal.
I think it's just because cultivation spren have like little like crystals that like come off of off their vines. I always assumed it was that.
And then you can use Fabrials to suppress surge binding, which is okay.
Yeah, cool.
Good to know. That's why Eartheru was safe from the fused. It's because Sibling was made it like no fused here. You fall asleep now.
I do like the mechanics of that. Like I said, we're all just kind of like, cool, that's a thing that exists. The mechanics of it It's hard to
accept
say.
Yeah,
you just kind of have to
it's
accept it. Yeah.
yeah, it's because like digging into that and figuring out how like, okay, you inverted the protection and that knocked out all the radiance, but it didn't knock out Lift because she's Lifelight, and also doesn't knock out Venli. Like Venli can use either Voidlight or Stormlight for her abilities. Like, could she have used Stormlight while the suppression field was on suppressing Stormlight? We don't know.
There's some weird stuff to it, but I'm like happy to just be like, screw it. Like the sibling is complicated. You know, it was made to do this specific thing, and then Raboniel tampered with it. Who knows what she did or kept the same or broke or changed and how it works. So
Yeah.
I mentioned previously, like it was a nice tool that Brandon used to kind of limit the powers, make Kaladin's fights not the same thing they've always been. And
I just liked that Fabrial's doing weird magical things.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of the Fabrial science we're seeing like is those very basic principled amplifiers, diminishers, or augmenters and diminishers, like pairing Fabrials, all that very basic stuff. I like seeing weird, complex magic stuff.
Yeah. Like the Fabrials aren't just they can do surge binding, or they can recreate surge binding, or they can recreate the stuff we've seen in other books. They have their own things going on that they could do that's unique to them.
There's a complexity there that I hope we get to explore someday. Well, thank you for watching. You can find us at 17 Shard for all the news, discussion, theories, and fun that you could ever want. You can find us on social media, SoundCloud. You can leave us a review on iTunes. You can subscribe on YouTube. And you can support us on Patreon. See you next time. Bye.
thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.